we aim to showcase an overview of the current landscape of citizen observatories and their respective innovations, and also some activities about the WeObserve Horizon 2020 projects that aim to facilitate synergies between the different initiatives and the citizen observatories, showcasing different activities that can facilitate the different aspects that are orienting around the development of citizen observatories. So, allow me to give the floor to the first of our speakers. So the first presentation is from Inian Murthy. It is about the LandSense Citizen Observatory. So, Inian, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Valantis, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're joining from. My name is Inian Murthy, and today I'll be taking a few minutes of your time to present our project LandSense, which is one of the Horizon 2020 Citizen Observatories. It is a household name to some of the other speakers that you'll hear from later today, but maybe new to some people in the audience. I'm based here just outside, not so shockingly, very cloudy Vienna at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. And I'm representing these different co-authors that you see within in the first slide here. First and foremost, I just wanted to describe a little bit about the motivation of the project itself. And what we're doing within LandSense is bringing together two worlds. We're bringing together the world of remote sensing and satellite observation of Earth, and also merging it with what and how citizen science can complement Earth observation information. So very conventionally, EO-based monitoring is done from a very top-down perspective. Those who have the data get to make the maps and the decisions. But what we would like to do is leverage citizen science and crowdsourcing methods to create a more participatory approach, which members in this audience would be very aware of, to not just promote environmental monitoring, but promote environmental stewardship. So in the right-hand side here of the slide, you have an idea of some of the accomplishments of the project itself. And if you would like, please visit our Zenodo community page to have a look at some of these publications and open access data sets. Very quickly, what I will first do is just step through some of the pilots that have taken place within the project. This gives you a better idea of some of the activities that have taken place and some of the achievements. We covered three different themes: urban landscape dynamics, agricultural land use, and forest and habitat monitoring. First and foremost, we ran a pilot in 2018 in Amsterdam, where we created a mobile application which essentially allowed park goers to provide subjective information which can then be complemented with other additional information to improve city planning. This mobile application allowed users to provide their perceptions of green spaces and perception of open spaces, which then can be combined with other city data to improve urban planning. And so not only we did this with a mobile application, but we also did traditional on-site surveys with park goers to compare the two data streams and then hand this over to the city. So they're currently working on upscaling this to other areas and other parts of Amsterdam. Another example of a demonstration pilot that took place within the project is from Toulouse, run by the French National Mapping Agency, responsible for authoritative data in France. And what we did here was run a series of mapathons where we used changes that we could see from a time series of satellite images, and then present these changes to a crowd and see whether these changes can be validated, whether these changes can then be appropriately delineated so it can feed directly into authoritative data sets. So really kind of showing a potential operational workflow of how citizen science and how crowdsourced data stream can fit within authoritative data streams. And there are three different data sets associated with this work as well, which is also available in our Zenodo repository. Switching gears a little bit now to the agricultural land use, where once again we engaged 2 high schools that focused on agriculture and agricultural monitoring and practices in the Vojvodina region of Serbia, where students and also further later on farmers were presented with a mobile application in which they were able to provide information on their crop management, crop condition, and to build a crop calendar. In addition to having that information, they were also provided with data streams of remote sensing data that allowed them to have a look at how healthy their fields were measured from above. So this was a novel insights to them, which they could then apply towards how they manage their crops. And finally, now within the forest and habitat monitoring theme, we're working with BirdLife International and their partners in Spain and Indonesia. And I presented the Spain example here, where we have created a mobile and web platform for them, essentially digitizing their workflow of how they monitor their important bird and biodiversity areas. So this mobile application allows people to do reporting of any threats that they see to biodiversity, which then gets run up the chain of IBA caretakers and national level coordinators to then be included in annual assessments, which feed into SDG monitoring, as BirdLife International is a data provider for SDG 15 and targets 15.1 and 15.4. So on that front, the very last thing that I'd just like to quickly comment on is we do have an ongoing pilot right now, which we presented as part of the EU Regions Week, an event running in parallel in Brussels and online right now, where we're running a mapathon allowing users to map land use. So this is the first kind of citizen-powered land use mapping across the EU. So as a call to action, I will post a link on the chat forum as well. I highly encourage participants to join this mapathon and help validate this map, where we would like to create, again, bringing citizen science and Earth observation together to create a land use map for the EU. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about our project here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Inian, for these interesting presentations and also for keeping the time. So let's continue. Okay, so I will be the one presenting. Okay. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, so okay, yep, sorry for this. Okay. So, my name is Valantis Tsiakos. I am a research scientist from the Institute of Communication and Computer Systems located in Athens, Greece, and I'm going to share a presentation about the Citizen Observatory and how smart technologies can be applied in the service of citizen-driven flood monitoring and management. So CEN is an Horizon 2020 funded project aiming to engage citizens in environmental monitoring of land cover land use changes through a variety of user-friendly tools and technologies. Here you can see a workflow of the system, how the different people from the authorities and the users interact with each other. So the tools give the possibility for the agencies and the public authorities to create a citizen science campaign, engaging with citizens. Then through the use of low-cost sensors and mobile applications, users are able to collect environmental measurements about the environment, and all this information is being analyzed in order to enhance flood mapping and liaise and provide improved maps of land cover land use, while we offer this information to GEOS platform in a standardized way, so to allow the uptake from other user communities. The project lasted for 3 years, involving 10 partners around Europe, and with a funding of more than 3 million euros. So just to give you an overview about what it was achieved there. So We have gaming platforms and low-cost sensors. So Sen Explore application is an augmented reality mobile applications that enable users to collect images of land cover land use, as well as images of water level indicators and of balls flowing in the water surface that allow us to extract information about the water level and the water velocity. Also, we have send measurement application with small portable sensors, allowing us to collect information about the soil moisture and temperature, and tools that allow us to validate the annotations provided by the users. So overall, we have more than 12,000 users during the project being able to visit these tools, contributing in different ways. And further to this, we're going to the crowdsourcing interoperability phase. So all these tools and the different front-end applications are being connected with a crowdsourcing platform that allow the communication between, let's say, the policymakers and the organizations and the agencies with the citizens. So policymakers can use a web-based interface to facilitate the design, the collection of the campaigns, in line also with their policy priorities. During the activities, they are able to monitor via dashboards in near real time the activities of the volunteers in each day of the campaign, the number of images of land cover land use elements that they have collected, or other data of interest. And all this information, all the data that are collected, are being managed, stored, and provided in a standardized way. So adopting ODC standards like the ODC Toolkits API that allow the harmonization of the data coming from citizens and other in-situ sensors that are available in the pilot areas of the project. And of course, apart from the data collection, there is an analytical layer in the platform. So images are collected from the volunteers, are being analyzed and classified according to a taxonomy that it is aligned with the Korean taxonomy when it comes to land cover land use. And also from the images collected from the volunteers that involve water level indicators, and we are able to extract from machine learning algorithms water level data and water velocity from videos collected. And all this information, for instance, the land cover land use annotations are being utilized in the context of the deep learning architecture that allow us to detect and annotate segments on satellite and aerial imagery with land cover land use elements that affect flood risk and flood pattern determination. Okay, so the focus of the project was, for instance, in one of our pilot areas in Danube Delta in Romania, was on the cover of the riverbanks. And apart from this, also citizen source information is used in the context of computation, or in the context of performing water dynamics computation in the pilot areas, enhancing the output through the combination of in-situ sensors, remote sensing data, and crowdsourced citizen-generated data. So all these tools were employed into large-scale pilot demonstrations lasting for 11 months and involving different thematic campaigns that are feeders to the local communities. The one is in the river basin of Kifisos in Attica region, and the other one it is in the Danube Delta in Romania. Having a diversity covering both urban and rural environment. So in these field trials, we have more than 700 participants participating, collecting more than 24,000 observations of elements that I mentioned about land cover land use, river parameters, and soil measurements, really able to contribute to the different aspects of the policy making in these areas of interest. So, and with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much, and we'll be happy also to share more details and answer any question as we continue with the presentations. Okay, and now allow me to hand over to Joan Massot. Joan?
Yes, hello, how are you? I'm Joan Massot, and I'm fighting with my computer to actually start the presentation. I hope that the fight is not long. That should be it. Hello, I'm going to talk about the experiments with interoperability to unlock the meaning with the citizen science data.
Sorry, Joan.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now. It seems that just with one click, you can not share your presentation again. So I believe I'm sharing, and please, you can double click on this small and tiny window to make it bigger. As I said, I work at CREAF. CREAF is a research center in Barcelona. And I'm here to talk about the experiments with interoperability to unlock the meaning with citizen science data. And we are doing this in the context of WeObserve. And WeObserve, here you see the logo, it's an Horizon 2020 project that is a coordinated and support action that has an inventory of citizen observatories that sits together and facilitate the update and the adoption of the Earth observation communities too. So the whole idea is to have the citizen observatories coordinated. And one of the things that we created was these communities of practice that are actually platforms where we share knowledge, we discuss about topics, and we learn things about engage, about impact, about interoperability, and about how citizen science can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals monitoring and indicators process. So one of the things that we have been doing for more than 2 years now is testing citizen science data sharing using Open Geospatial Consortium standards, such as the observation lab measurements, the sensor observation services, and the sensor thing APIs. We had 4 sensor observation services available in the experiment. There was the Grow Observatory that will be described afterwards. There was this IST SOS from using Hackair data from DLR. There was a 52 North SOS. There was a Miramon SOS. And we also had 3 clients, one JavaScript client, the Grow client that was based on Microsoft developments, and the Helgoland client from 52 North. And we tested combinations, and with what we learned, we produced this set of instructions on how citizen science project can easily set up SOS services that by now you will know that it's about sensor observations and not about crying for help. So now I'm going to use the next 20 minutes describing all the different architectures that we used. No, Valantis, sorry. I'm just showing one of them. And in this case, what you are seeing here into the right-hand side are 2 observatories, Natusfera and the Hackair. And they both have different APIs. So what we want is to have a common way of accessing this data. So we build these adapters and we build a front end that is actually an ODC SOS service. So there are 2 of them. One it's for the Lima Natura Observatory, that's Miramon, and there is another one from 52 North that serves Hackair data. And those use the same protocol. So now I can, in the left-hand side, use a client, just an application, to see both data simultaneously. And this is not just theory, this happens. So this is an example of combination 1 of Groudtruth data and Hackair data in a single client, where you see all these balloons. This is Hackair. Where you see green dots, this is Groudtruth. Second test here, the Grow data set. mainly in the represented in UK dots, and the Hackair data mainly represented in these other light green dots in Germany. Combination 3, that's the Helgoland application from 50 to North, and the Hackair data again represented here this time as a blue things. And also one of the characteristics of Helgoland is this idea of easily showing a time series that reflects on the evolution of the air pollution data that Hackair is providing. So we documented the results of those experiments in what we call the first phase of the interoperability experiment. We presented that into the Open Geospatial Consortium. They approved that as a public document and is now as an engineering report in their webpage. You can download it, you can read it, and hopefully you can use the information to actually provide a better data share interface for your citizen observatory that eventually could contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are at the middle of the second phase. We are no longer into these rooms full of people. As you might imagine, we are now using the virtual cyberspace to actually continue our activities. And for the second phase, we are talking about Sensor-Think API, and that connects nicely with Valantis' description of it before. We have been supporting the Earth Challenge 2020 because this is a global effort. So the Earth Challenge 2020 is a US driven activity. We are studying how to better define our variables using the ODC definition service server to achieve semantic interoperability. And of course, we are monitoring some of the COVID-19 activities in citizen science. Well, that's something that feels like an obligation these days. And you can follow our discussions and our meetings. You can join us. And this is one URL where you can find all the information of our different discussions and conclusions. And everybody that knows me will be expecting a UML diagram. So I don't want to disappoint you. This is the Sensor-Think API UML diagram that describes the data model. And we have sensors, we have observed properties, we have observations, we have data streams, we have things. But where on earth is the citizen? So that is what
50
we are...
seconds, John.
Yeah, and that is what we are actually studying in this second phase of the interoperability experiment, how to connect the user to the Sensor-Think API model. I would like to thank the initiators and the supporters and the participants, of course, of the interoperability experiment, and also thank to you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Joan. Thanks a lot for this presentation. That fits really nicely to what we do in the context of WeObserve. And now allow me to hand over and give the floor to Mel Woods. Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody. I trust you can see my presentation. This morning I'm going to present on behalf of two colleagues from University of Dundee, Raquel Gonzalez and Saskia Coulson. And the first presentation I will give is on a piece of work we have done on behalf of WeObserve for all 4 observatories that you've heard about this morning, including the Grow Observatory, which we led here from Dundee. And that is around open data and the way in which open data, if we prepare for it, can create a lasting legacy for observatory data sets that citizens themselves have collected, enabling innovation and entrepreneurialism and releasing that data for common use out into the world. So earlier on this year, we kicked off a period of investigation and preparation to launch our own open data challenge for WeObserve. looking at all of the data sets that we had available, and thinking about our objectives in terms of making those more widely available for uptake. So those objectives, this is strange. Yes. So we're looking to promote the uptake of CO open data sets and to show individual and combined potential of Citizen Observatory data, to produce innovative applications, and also to showcase open data solutions for social good. We followed an open source sort of downstream application objective. So our initial idea was to look at the Open Data Challenge series method by the ODI in the UK, which follows a particular framework of scoping and exploring the social need, assessing the open data and creating challenge questions, creating an application for that, going through, and here they suggest in a weekend, a pitch and selecting finalists and then incubating those outcomes. However, for WeObserve, we were launching remotely. My presentation seems to have stopped at this point, so I'll carry on and we'll just see if it comes back in. So we were launching remotely and creating 7 challenge areas in which in which we could launch and attract people all over the world, teams all over the world, to join us. Yes, sorry about this. I think my application has somehow frozen, but my camera is on, so I'll carry on talking about what we did. So we hope to attract a number of participants from all over the world through 7 challenge themes that we developed alongside our observatories and focusing on the data that we had available. These ranged from biodiversity to land mapping, but also included a data category in relation to data we had around air quality that linked to the pandemic, to COVID, to see if we would have any challenge accepting teams that might tackle that. Moving forward, we identified the need for back-end services, including mentoring from data experts that knew the data well. And in the end, we had 44 teams that came on board from globally to look at our data, the data released from Citizen Observatories, and to take up the challenge to innovate with that over the course of about 6 weeks. Following that, we had a panel of specially selected experts chaired by Gerrit Hager from IASA, who went through and looked at the criteria, which included the further open access of any applications that came out, the need for addressing social good in terms of applications that came out, and a number of other criteria that guided our choice for the winners of the challenge. Altogether, we had 44 teams globally. We had around about 12 teams made it through to final application, which included a video of the application itself running, the release of open source code, and an application around their team and their competency and their entrepreneurialism. And we're very happy to say that we made 2 awards that we'll be presenting later on here at the conference. And if you go into Hop-In session 18, you'll find out about those winning applications later on this afternoon. And I think due to the fact that my presentation has frozen, I'll stop here and come out and hopefully be able to come back in again in the next presentation. So I'm handing back over to you now, Valantis.
Thanks a lot, Mel. Thank you very much for your presentation. Would you like to try to connect again, or to try to share again your screen?
I'll share my screen again for the next presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everybody. And can you see that okay? Could you confirm, Valantis?
We cannot see it yet.
You can't see it yet, okay. Just one moment.
Yeah, now we can see it.
Thank you. Okay, so it's me again. I'm presenting this morning. Unfortunately, my colleagues through a series of events were not able to join. So I'm presenting further work that we've done from the University of Dundee on behalf of WeObserve, our work on open source toolkits. So there's a theme running through the presentations here this morning. You can see that one of our guiding principles in terms of the work at the University of Dundee on behalf of GROW is to open as much of our many of our resources, our data, our toolkits to the world and license those freely for use. We believe that this is one of the best ways of achieving amplification and uptake of our results. So we have a track record of developing tools for citizen science. Many of you may recognize Citizen Science Toolkit, which was a collection of 25 tools and methods that came out of the Making Sense consortium, and we delivered that through a book sprint here in Scotland. But we have a research positioning to investigate the open source tools and toolkits that support a high level of public participation in the scientific process. And we reviewed and identified a gap with the provision of open source accessible and collaborative tools for citizen science and Citizen Observatory. This is really coming from our background in design research, where there is a track record of presenting and giving tools to people in order for them to use. And that means presenting people with step-by-step methodologies as well as canvases. But we recognize tools can mean much more to many other people. So tools as a concept, we're interested in open accessible methods, but tools do remain elusive. And so we looked at research into existing platforms that promote tools in citizen science. And this is where we looked. Of course, many of you will recognize the EU Citizen Science platform, Citizen Science here at the forefront, and Citizen Science Gov. And we conducted a WeObserve survey in 2018 to collect existing tools and toolkits from across all phases of the process. And the toolkit survey included the sorts of questions that related to specific tools and methods, tool authors and the main audience for each submission, and an in-depth rich metadata and information aligning with the types of steps you might take through the process. So the evaluation of our findings were that the tools and resources gathered during research were evaluated on the following criteria factors: open source, downloadable, and participatory methods. So downloadable and open source could include software or soft tools, which have less strict licensing agreements. Downloadable is the ability or the potential ability to download the assets to assist anyone in using the tool, and participatory methods, as I've described, enabling citizens to play an active and influential part in decisions that that affect their everyday lives. So just a couple of examples. We created a co-creation, co-design game for the Citizen Science Project or Citizen Observatory that can be undertaken and facilitated by a range of people in order to identify gaps for new COs. We have looked at enabling communities to decide on the best methods to monitor their local environment through a range of other tools. And we have looked at tools on the visualization of data that allow people to make decisions based on, for instance, water availability here in GROW. In addition, we're very keen on the evaluation and advocacy of change in citizen science projects. So we have the types of tools here that have enabled us to map with communities and also community champions to map with their community the evaluation of change that have happened within projects. So very briefly moving on to research outcomes, we've provided an open source downloadable toolkit on the WeObserve online course that's running currently. And these are the open source tools that we've just made available. And we're providing tools and toolkits on the WeObserve Knowledge Hub, and you can reach that through going to the WeObserve website. Our current MOOC, our online course, of which many people here in our session are contributing to, is around citizen science projects and how to make a difference. And we're releasing and opening many, many more tools in order for people to download them for themselves and try them out. And this course is open and available now for you to join, and runs for another 2.5 weeks. And here you can see where to find our tools and toolkits online, and they're categorized there around the types of typologies of tools that might be available. So just to close, our next steps is a research study into the uptake of tools from Citizen Science Toolkit, and we'll be releasing a questionnaire in order to find out how those tools have been used in real practice. We're going to be assessing the uptake of tools from the WeObserve online course and the Toolkit platform, and disseminating and evaluating the uptake of open access downloadable tools to other citizen science resource platforms. There are barriers, of course, to further development, and that's a need for platforms to be interoperable, to present and disseminate similar information and resources, and that facilitation and delivery competencies are often needed even in the release of open source, open license tools, in order for communities who may not be familiar with a kind of innovation process in order to take those up. And I thank you very much indeed, and apologies for the previous freeze on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel, for this interesting presentation, and also thanks for adhering to the time. Now our next speaker is Nuria Castel. Nuria, let me hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I will be talking about a new project, Nordic Path, that is happening right now in Scandinavia, and where we are aiming to engage citizens in improving air quality through sustainable urban design. And there is this interlink between sustainable urban planning and health that is very well described by this image from Mark Newhansen, where if we imagine, for example, a city, a compact city that has safe, walkable and cycling path, we can that can change the behavior of citizens and get them to change their habits of taking the car to go to work just by walking and cycling, because their work is close and their shops are closer to their houses. That, of course, will reduce air pollution and also noise. It will increase physical activity, and by that, it will also reduce morbidity and mortality. So what we aim in this project is to co-create urban spaces, surveys, but also like workshops, and monitoring air pollution using low-cost sensors. And we will pilot this at neighborhood level in 3 cities in the Nordic countries. It will be in Aalborg in Denmark, Gothenburg in Sweden, and Kristiansand in Norway. In order to get a variety of citizens engaged in the project, we are having open calls in the different cities. This is an example of our open call now in Kristiansand, where we are launching the project this week, when the Sustainable Festival is taking place there, and we invite the citizens to register in the project and asking them if they want to host a sensor or participate in an online survey, in this case about wood burning and sustainable house heating in Kristiansand. This is the smart low-cost sensors we are using to together with citizens to monitor air quality. And one of the aims of monitoring air quality is that the data will be not only available to the citizens, but also to the municipality, because there are many neighborhoods right now that are underserved in air quality, and their municipality does not know what is the levels of air pollution in those neighborhoods. With this citizen engagement in monitoring, they will be providing data to the municipality, and this data will serve the municipality to prioritize actions in those neighborhoods and streets where air pollution levels are higher. We also want to get as much citizens involved as possible, and for that we are having 2 ways of participatory in urban planning. One will be through surveys, and we are using these engaging surveys by Maptionaire, where there's also like a gamification component on it, and is able not only to answer simple questions, but also participate with GIS and components of layers. Like examples are like people can vote what infrastructure should be in their neighborhood, or have participation in the master plans in their city, or how the budget from the municipality should be expended in different designing, as for example, how should it be spent in designing a park. And we will also then analyze the data collected during the air quality data collected and the data collected in the participatory surveys in workshops together, where it will participate both citizens and the municipality. And then this will contribute to the municipality to get insights in which type of policies are have a larger level of agreement between the citizens, what other policies that maybe they haven't thought about, but can be of interest and are ideas proposed by citizens themselves. And that this is
1 minute, Nuria. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, this is the last slide. This is an example of what is possible to do. This is from another project, Metamorphosis, where they are engaging children in mobility issues, and this is changing a parking space into a juice bar. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nuria, for the interesting presentation. And now, let me give the floor to Luis Francis. Luis.
Hi, good morning. Let me just share my screen. And just remind viewers to double click on the slides so that you can see it in full view. So my speed talk today is to introduce the International Odour Observatory, which is a co-designed resource by and for the quadruple helix stakeholders. And I'll briefly introduce the DNOS's project and why we saw the need for developing the International Odour Observatory, and then touch on the co-design process that we deployed, and then give an example of some of the tools that are currently available. So DNOS's is funded under the Horizon 2020 program, and it sets out to investigate how co-creative citizen science approaches can empower citizens to take a leading role in tackling odour pollution, while supporting the active involvement of key stakeholders within the quadruple helix model, but also to facilitate the implementation of Principle 10 in terms of providing access to information through the International Odour Observatory. So what was the need? Odour pollution negatively impacts people's quality of life and is one of the main causes of environmental complaints after noise, but it's difficult to measure, and current abatement solutions are costly. And there's inconsistency with regards to how it's regulated across different territories, but there lacks Europe-wide definitions and terms and common criteria to actually establish odour impact thresholds. So we really need to develop trust and build transparency, but also share best practice and promote cooperation amongst the different stakeholders affected differently by odour issues. So DNOS's touches on each of these 4 sustainable development goals across the 10 pilots that we're currently running in Europe, Africa, and South America. So in keeping with the overarching co-creative ethos of the project, part of the co-design process saw us create user stories from the different perspectives of the quadruple helix actors to understand what they might want from an odor observatory of this kind. And then we validated these user stories with different stakeholders to understand whether they were truly representative. During different events and activities involving both citizens, odor experts, and researchers, we asked people what they would search for when seeking out information in relation to odor issues, and also presented people with a homepage mock-up and asked them where they would click to get information on things like regulations, for example. And we used this input and feedback to create the first version of the odor observatory. And this resulted in the current structure with 4 basic entry points, depending on whether users wanted to get informed, get involved, get inspired, or actually start taking observations. So the 4 main tools that we've created so far are designed to be scalable and extensible for different scenarios and use cases, and each can be relevant to the different stakeholders in different ways. So I'll briefly introduce those now. So Community Maps, one of the tools, is a flexible map-based platform to facilitate customizable map creation by non-experts based on specific needs and contexts. So it enables us to visualize complex information in an accessible format. For example, the odor regulations map that can be added to by regulators and experts in the field, but also can be consumed by citizens. And another example are our map of stories from communities currently being affected by odor. Odor Collect, one of the other tools, is a web app to collect real-time odor observations. With these observations, we can identify patterns of specific odor episodes, potential sources of odor, and it's a cost-effective monitoring approach that provides transparency, which can in turn support targeted mitigation measures. Linked to this is the Odor Collect dashboard, which is an administrative tool to enable users such as public administrators to view the data collected via Odor Collect. It enables us to delimit an area for specific investigation and also to validate the citizens' observations being made and filter these based on time or location. And it also supports the management of users within the platform. And last of the tools that I'm going to present today is ProLaw, which is a forecasting model that combines both topology and meteorological data to calculate retro trajectories so that we can determine the possible origin of an odor observation, which can then support the validation process of citizens' observations, but also understand the potential area of impact. And this can be useful for both industries and regulators, along with researchers. Within the Odor Observatory itself, there are other resources and tools and information available. Okay, this is the last slide. And our partners this afternoon will be presenting the online MOOC that we've created for educators during the poster session. So I ask you maybe to go and have a look at that later on this afternoon. All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Louise, for this nice presentation. And let's move to the following one from Sven and Julia.
Okay, so Sven and I, we are part of a project called CS Track, which is a bit different to the other ones presented in this session. We are actually looking at the citizen science landscape in Europe. And again, you can click on the slides to see the slides in a larger window. As CS Track, we actually aim to broaden our knowledge about citizen science, find good practice examples, develop knowledge-based policy recommendation, and overall to maximize the potential benefit of citizen science. And we have 9 different partners bringing in very different kinds of expertise, which then allows us to use research methods from different disciplines. So we can use social science methods, but also web analytics. And in this talk, we're going to focus on citizen science online communities. And as you can see with the selected references to literature, there's this growing body of literature in the field, helping us to understand the complexity of these online communities, providing us with evidence that knowledge production is actually happening, knowledge production for research, but also in terms of individual learning outcomes. There are studies telling us how important the interactions are that are happening in these communities with professional scientists, but also with other participants in the project, and how the design of the platforms, the actual project tasks, the community also may impact data quality. And all those studies are kind of hard to compare because there's no standardized approach and they're very resource intense. And Sven is going to share with you a couple of ideas how we can use web analytics to contribute to the field.
Thanks, Julia. So we have a dedicated approach in CS Track where we want to monitor and observe CS projects and activities, and therefore we define a set of descriptors and indicators that might be useful to characterize CS projects or to derive some quality indicators or measurements. For example, the number of publications from a project or the level of participation. So therefore we use those indicators and descriptors in order to derive analytics from that and to analyze further projects. We also use a certain project database, and probably you have attended the talk yesterday by Patricia Santos about the CS Track database, a very interesting work, and we facilitate this database in order to enrich the analytics and to have a rich corpus of project data involved. And finally, when we have those results, we present them and publish them in e-magazines. And check out the project website. At the end of the year, we will have the first issue of the e-magazine. So there might be some interesting stuff to come up. Yeah. And I will now present you two examples of analytics workflows that we have used, that we have done so far. And the first example is the analysis of the Chimpanzee talk pages. Maybe you know Chimpanzee as one of the projects from the Zooniverse platform. And what we want to investigate is actually how the different roles in this community structure, in this discussion forum, are distributed and how they communicate. There's three prescribed roles in those so-called talk pages: a moderator, a scientist, and a volunteer. Moderators are predefined from the project itself and scientists, and volunteers are more likely to be those citizen scientists. So what we have those talk pages. We built from those talk pages a discourse data set that represents and reflects the discussion itself. It contains mentionings with the @ symbol or references to objects and tags, for example, monkeys that are classified. And then on those discourse data set, we extract social networks in order to have a representation of the communication structure. And when we take a look at those structures, we can see how the different actors communicate on the sub-forums, those so-called boards. There's, for example, a help forum, and there you can see that, for example, volunteers reference other volunteers quite low. There's not really a talk between different volunteers on the help board, and this is obvious because moderators have an important role in help seeking, so they can redirect questions to other volunteers where they know about that, or to other scientists. And of course, if you go to the chat board, there you can see that there are probably a lot of introductory threads where, for example, moderators welcome certain citizen scientists or redirect to particular scientists or experts. And in the science board, which is really one of the interesting parts there as well, there you can see that volunteers now play a very subordinate role in this science board. They just make a small portion of the whole forum discussion there in terms of references.
1 minute, Sven.
Yes, the second example is the analysis of research areas on Zooniverse. So we took all of those Zooniverse projects, They have info pages. We extracted data automatically and compared that to a Web of Science taxonomy so that we can really see a distribution of research areas. And in comparison to other projects, we investigated interdisciplinarity because most of the analysis just take a main primary discipline or research area for each project. So there we can see which areas are interdisciplinary.
And this is just a short outlook of the expected project outcomes. We expect to have a database and a community platform, so people will have access to the data that we gathered as CS Track. And one of the outcomes that Sven demonstrated would be to have a monitoring technique for research areas, and that may include tracking the links to the SDGs. And these are just the highlights, and due to time reasons, we're just going to end our presentation here and also share the link to the project again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe you can do a snipping of this and just to have all the resources. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sven and Julia, for the nice presentation. And I believe with this we conclude this session with the presentations. So I can ask all presenters to enter again the room. And also for the audience, please feel free to use the chat. We have some time left for you to make some questions about the presentations or about the elements presented. The presenters are here for you to support this activity. You can use the chat window. Okay, so we have a question for Sven and Julia. So will the outcome of the project also include projects that are being in proposal phase? Let's say that would like to frame their impact into SDGs.
Yes, as long as they are represented in some kind of platform, for example, a citizen science platform or other web presences. So it's due to our data gathering methods where we use national citizen science platforms, for example, and gather the information of projects that are listed there. So if the information about the project that is in proposal phase is available, yes, that would be gathered in our database and that would be part of the analysis.
Maybe you have a certain project in mind and you can check if there's something like a project page that we can also expose or something like that. Then we can check that.
Mm-hmm. And also a question for Luis. Were all your tools specifically made for your project? Would it be possible to use them in other projects?
No, a number of the tools, for example, community maps is being used in a wide variety of contexts and projects, looking at, for example, air quality, citizen science projects linked to air quality, noise pollution monitoring. So quite a lot of them can be customized and used in different projects in different contexts. Obviously, with the Odor Collect app, that's been designed specifically for this context and for use in this project. But no, some of them are are definitely compatible to be used by other projects.
And also another question is the co-design methodology from Dinosis already written up, available somewhere?
There are some preliminary papers, and I will try to dig them out and stick them in the link. And we also are just submitting a paper at the moment to kind of outline the whole methodology, and also how, giving examples of how it's being used in the context of Barcelona, which is one of the pilots, and also in a community in Chile, which is another kind of pilot area that we're working on. So I'll try and do.
Okay, I think we lost Luis for a moment. Okay, for Jean Mazot, you mentioned that the next phase will be to plug in into the end users and citizens. Just curious on which methods you could be applying.
I mean, it's not a question of plugging the user itself, of course. It's a question of plugging the user into the sensor-thing API model as another thing that you should describe. Of course, we are doing here citizen science, so the sensors, the values, the observation property are important, but also the user itself is important. The user requires acknowledgement, requires recognition, and it also provides some quality in terms of reputation. So we want to associate, of course, the observations with the users themselves. And this is, well, the method that we are going to use is to extend the sensor-thing API in something that we could call Sensor Citizen API, and present that to the OGC for having this standardized as one possible way of do data sharing in citizen science.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, for Julia and Sven, how do you select projects? Do you request accept examples for analysis?
So actually, this is right now one of the discussion points that we are facing in the project. So we are really defining, as part of one of the work packages, exclusion criteria for projects, for certain examples, for platforms, and this is not defined in total yet.
But we are, of course, listening to the field and what's going on. So there have been a couple of developments where we are taking hints. And if you have any ideas of what we should look for in the database and in the analysis, then we're very much open to suggestions.
And also another question for you guys is, how do you think that the CS track project can involve the SDG community with producing requirements to the analysis done in the project? Can you hear me?
Yes, I think I did. Yeah, the SDGs are kind of one of the examples that I mentioned, where the field is moving in a certain direction, and we are trying to come up with approaches to include that in our analysis. So yeah, so based on the paper from Dilek Freisel, for example, there are some steps that we are trying to converse into the web analytics methodology and try to apply it to our platform. So this is just one example of how we are kind of inspired of what's going on in the field and try to adapt and apply this to CS Track.
Okay, so we are just 5 minutes away from the next session. I think that if there are any more questions, we will conclude this session. Yeah, please feel free to fill out the short feedback survey about the session. That it is available in the chat room in order to have your feedback, and hope I hope that you have enjoyed the session, and also just to bring to your attention that some of the material presented is also available. Some also relevant content will be available in the e-poster session that is taking place in the noon. Okay, some of the material, some of the content of this thematic session will be also presented there as posters. And also to let you know that since this is the first of the session threads organized from the WeObserve project, keep in mind that more presentations are coming next week, like the contribution of citizen science data to monitoring the SDGs in session 11, the transformative potential of citizen science and citizen observatories for modeling action, for mobilizing action towards achieving the SDGs, session number 14. And we conclude with session number 18 with the WeObserve showcase demonstrating values and applications of Citizen Observatories data. We will have some results about the Open Data Challenge that Mel presented, and also some other activities about the WeObserve, the Inspire Hackathon, where we held vast participation from citizen science activities, and also a presentation about Citizen Observatories for end observations, from examples to best practices. So thanks again. I would like to thank all the speakers for the interesting presentations, and all the participants for joining this session. And I really hope to enjoy the next of the remaining of the event. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.